Welcome into this special episode of In the Loop with InterPark Magazine Halloween Edition. Joining me today is the publisher of the Haunted Attraction Network, Philip Hernandez. And a very happy Halloween to you, Philip.
Well, happy Halloween.
That's a great start to the show. I love the Halloween, the vibe that you've got already.
Yes, you can't see it, but I am wearing like a Halloween shirt from somebody, and also, like Halloween pajamas, so it's great.
There you go. Already in the Halloween spirit. I absolutely love it. Brilliant. Right, let's crack on. Before we get even more spooky, just tell our viewers and our listeners who you are in the haunt world and where they might find you.
Yeah, so like you said at the top, I run the Haunted Attraction Network, and I think of us as a news resource for the haunted attraction industry. So during the Halloween season, we do a little bit more of just going out and reporting at locations, but we also do news coverage year round. And so our main landing source, I would say, is our newsletter. So we get on that newsletter, we send that out every Monday year round, and we cover industry news, trade show information, economic news, that kind of stuff that as pertains to the haunted house industry. But of course, you can find us anywhere because we have social media presences, our YouTube and all that. But, it depends. Those are for the more walkthrough type of on-location reporting. So elsewhere, I do co-host my own podcast that we do every week. It's called Green Tagged Theme Park in 30, and I co-host that with Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Creative Development. And we've been doing that for 5 years-ish every week. And you can find us on YouTube. Now we're collecting a little bit of an audience there on YouTube, or just going to greentagshow.com, and all of our information's on there. Or, any podcast player. But people seem to like us on YouTube for reasons I don't understand. I don't know why people like to watch us on YouTube, but that's how it is. So, and also, you can find me also over at Gantom Lighting and Controls, where I run Gantom Lighting. So we work with every major theme park in the world for that. So yeah.
There you go. Basically everywhere. You're everywhere.
That's right. Oh, I also write for other magazines too. I also write for Attractions Magazine and InPark. So I have author pages on both of those. So if you can go look at the stuff. I don't just write about Halloween. That's a
you don't write about it. You are Halloween. That's what it is, Mr. Halloween.
I do write a lot about Halloween, yeah, but not all about it. So, I write, I think during the Halloween season, I take a break from most of that stuff because most of what we do is go on location and do that kind of stuff, as well as I have a few clients. I help them with their publicity. So I just got back from Michigan because I was working at a haunted house there. And so Halloween is pretty busy. So then during the off season, then, I'll go back to reporting on other things for other people.
Excellent. Just take us back for a moment. What first pulled you into the world of haunted attractions?
So a long time ago, I had my own home haunted house. That was a long time ago. Yeah, I had a home haunt. We call them home haunts. So I had a home haunt, and it got to be a whole experience there. We did it for several years, and eventually it got to the point where we just had to move it because we had too many people, and the city just, it got complicated because we had to hire security, we had to hire armed guards, we had to kind of block off the street and file a bunch of permits. But then eventually enough people were attending that we were talking thousands of people were attending, coming, driving up to attend the home haunt, and it was obstructing the neighborhood. So we had to move it to a commercial location. So I ran it out of a commercial location for several years. And then it just was too much for me because it's a lot. I usually tell people that haunted houses are a terrible business and you definitely should not do them. if there's anything else you can do. And so I stopped actually operating haunted houses, but after that, I got more into reporting, and now I actually work at a few as part of a team. So I think it all depends on the team again that you're working with, and it was just me, and we didn't know what we were doing when I was running it, and so that's a hard spot to be in. But I think even from even a younger age, I thought that Halloween was always interesting, from a aesthetic standpoint, just because it's really the only holiday that encourages creativity and also encourages you to do stuff with your friends. Everything else is more about family, and it's more about there's a set style that you celebrate. Halloween, it's like every year is different, and every time there's an ability to, it encourages creativity a little bit more. So I think because of those reasons, I was always fascinated with Halloween, and then I did home haunting, and then from there, so I kind of had that background, right, going into it.
You can get your creative juices going with Halloween. I remember as a kid just dressing up, like doing the old trick and treat. And like you say, it's something that you can really like get involved with and immerse yourselves in of all the seasons and special events there are in the world
Yep.
throughout the
Yep.
year. And that's a really, really important factor of Halloween. Speaking of Halloween with this year, where are you seeing surprise sellouts or unexpected success stories?
Yeah, it's been very interesting because I've been trying to track throughout the season how the houses are doing, at least here in America. And it's very interesting because I really haven't quite figured out what the pattern is yet. You see some houses that are doing really well, but then you also have some haunted attractions that are doing very bad. And I can't quite figure out what the pattern is. So, of course, in the US, there's a lot of there's trouble right now, and so haunted houses in the Chicago market aren't doing very well. But is that because of the ICE being there and the protests, or is it because of the economy? What exactly is it? And it's hard because in the tourism space there are multiple factors, right? Because we're yeah, I think depending on where you slide in the tourism factor, I think sometimes you're the first thing to be cut, and sometimes you're the last thing to be cut when individual consumers are making their decisions, right? Um, so all that being said, there have been bright spots in everything, and I think we can see bright spots usually in the theme parks. So you see bright spots in the theme parks. So, the premium Scream night that Universal Studios held sold out this year, and that was a pretty bright spot at the time because that was, August 29th, so it's early in the year and it's still hot, and it was $375 per person. So if they sell out at that price point, that's significant, that's a significant data point. But we've also seen, we've seen still strong sales numbers with after party stuff in Disneyland as well. Like Oogie Boogie Bash is still doing pretty good. However, on the flip side, you see the places like Knott's Scary Farm and Six Flags Magic Mountain cutting days, actually removing days off the calendar and like refunding guests or trying to rebook them for those days. So like it's weird because even in individual markets, you're seeing this weird thing. And the best I can come up with is like if the haunted house or the attraction is something that has become like big enough, like it's iconic, then I think people will find the money to go. That's what as much as I've thought about, like people still either that, or I think if you're a haunted house that's on the or an attraction that's on the higher end, right? Like Disneyland is more expensive than Six Flags. So I think like it's more expensive and then it's Disneyland. So I think that event is still selling well versus like Six Flags that is not selling well anywhere. Actually, they're not selling well in any market. Um, so that's yeah. And in individual haunted houses, I know some haunted houses in Cincinnati are doing well, and then the haunt that I was working at in Detroit, this past region, that was doing very well. Like maybe up 20% or something from the previous year at individual nights. Some nights are still slow, but some nights were up a lot. So, and then just record attendance, like the last Saturday was, record, like a record attendance night, as in the highest night in the history of the attraction. So So it's interesting. I still think we're just seeing like ups and downs, and I'm not sure it's really as easy to say it's by market. I do think there are some markets that are just higher overall, but I think it's more complicated than that. I know if I have a source in Vegas as well, all of his attractions are sold out. So that's, I mean, but then again, you have other events that didn't even launch in Vegas, like the Circus thing didn't go well this year. So yeah, even within each market, I think there's some bifurcation, and then you see some markets where there's more protests or there's other things going on. The tourism just overall is smaller in those in particular. So I think it really depends, and then the economy. I think if your attraction is more geared towards lower income levels, and those income levels are being impacted, you're having a hard time. Or if you're in an area that has a lot of government workers and the government shut down, and so then those people don't have as much money. So it's complicated. That's the
It's
answer.
complicated. It sounds complicated indeed, yes. And in terms of like new technologies and excitement, what's new and exciting this year, whether it's tech, storytelling, design, or guest experience from your point of view?
Yeah, I think people always ask about technology with haunted houses, and I think that technology does change, but what most people enjoy about haunted houses is the interaction with the actors, and that never changes. So, I always think that the technology should be secondary to supporting the storyline and supporting the actors in their areas. So, I mean, I've seen, usually what happens is you see stuff that debuts at IAPA, and then as the years go through, then it winds up at haunted houses at some point. So, and IAPA or at Transworld, the big Halloween show in St. Louis. So either way, something debuts there, and then you see it trickle through haunted houses. I didn't think we really saw anything that was, extraordinarily innovative. But again, even if it were, you wouldn't really be changing like the nature of it. I mean, there are some devices there, like there was that big fog gun that received the one of the IAPA exhibitor awards a few years back, and you see that at a few attractions. You even see that at Disneyland. Actually, they were even using it this year. And then, you see, the laser swamp is in every haunted house, I would say. And then but you still have the old vortex tunnels and that stuff. There are some technologies, I think, that are trying to measure fear and measure reactions in people that you're seeing folks test, here and there. But I think nothing has really stood out. And then when it comes to the theme park side, Six Flags is experimenting with a new upsell at four of its locations, and that's heavily technology based. But it's a standalone experience for The Conjuring. It's a standalone experience, and it's more of a escape room type thing that has a much higher technology. So there's DMX sequence lights all throughout that, a significant amount of that. So that seems to be doing well. But is it doing well because of the technology, or because it is a new thing that is built well when none of the other stuff at their parks is? I don't know. Like, I don't know. Again, which one is it? Would it have been just as fine with more actors instead of technology? I don't know. But I think in the theme park trend, in the theme parks, there's definitely a trend to replace humans with technology as a way to counterbalance increasing staff costs. However, that's less of an issue now than it was. And I think seasonal events have always relied much more on the humans to scare humans or to interact with them or whatnot. So I think it's just less of a component in the haunted house space in particular. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
speaking of interactions, I was in Ventura about a month ago, just at the start of their Halloween season, and I thought it was really, really good. You can see that Ventura spend a lot of time and effort on their entertainment lineup, and their Halloween show was fantastic about a 20, 25-minute show with a line of street paraders all dressed from the Halloween people throughout the day. You could see trying to scare you, and it was really really good. The dance choreographies, the people coming out of you at any one moment. I thought it was a really, really well produced and fun and entertaining show that they put on, followed by some fireworks and a show on the lake that they've got with the guy coming out of the water on the jet that they've got
Yep.
there. And I thought it was fantastic how they put it over. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that from Portaventura because they put it over really, really well and made you feel like you were there at Halloween. Obviously, all the parks are doing their best to do they give the very best Halloween offering that they can, and certainly my experience at Portaventura, yeah, made me feel very immersed from the first minute in all things Halloween.
Yeah. They had haunted houses there too, right? Or they don't call them haunted houses, but they had like a haunted street or something in with actors, right? At PortAventura.
Yeah, scare mazes. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
I think there's like 4 or 5 of them.
Yep.
That I tried one of them, and yeah, it was like a Mexican themed, like the Mexican themed hotel that I stayed at, El Paso, which was really really nice as well. And yeah, it was just fascinating to see the actors coming out when you didn't expect them, and how they can just like when you go in again, you could probably have a different experience, and that's the key nowadays is the repeatability of not just on roller coasters and rides, but these haunt attractions as well.
Yeah, I heard. I did not see the Halloween at Port Aventura, but I heard about it. My co-host Scott Swenson on Green Tag, he was teaching at IAPA. He was teaching the Certified Attractions Professional program there, so they were able to see Port Aventura. But I think it is very interesting that they had the entertainment, but also the mazes because I think that the mazes seem to be a uniquely American type of thing. Like every culture has not every culture has Halloween, but every culture has something where you honor spirits and you remember people. They all have something in that vein. But I think that the modern Halloween is a uniquely American export. So it's always interesting for me to hear how other countries are interpreting that. So I was interested that they actually were doing scare mazes. I think that's a yeah, interesting take on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly over in Spain, the last I've been here for 10 years, and you notice a big difference between my first year here when hardly anyone was dressing up and there was no one speaking about Halloween to now where people are actively looking for scare entertainment throughout the board.
Yeah, so they're called Passages of Terror. There we go. That's what it is. And then
Passages
La
of Terror.
Muerta Viva, I think is what you went through.
La Muerta Viva, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Really, really great attraction. Yeah, I mean, I think there was 4 or 5 of the ones that you could
Yep.
go for as well. But yeah, you can see that Portaventura they've got it nailed on the entertainment package for sure. And in terms of decorations and merchandise, and speaking of merchandise, that leads me to my next question about what makes great haunt merchandise for you in 2025.
Yeah, I think haunt merchandise, I think you follow the same rules that, we always talk about for any sort of merchandise is that merchandise really what it should be is something that kind of encapsulates a memory for the guests that are going through. And so I don't know, I think it's fine to do the easy stuff, which is to just have your logo and that kind of stuff. But I do think there's a lot of room in really taking that up a little bit and thinking about how you create unique items for people that also capture memories for them. And the same thing I think with the theme parks, what you see is food and beverage and merchandise, of course, kind of tied together, but becoming larger portions of the revenue for the seasonal activations, even to the point where you have some theme parks that are mentioning it in their earnings call, and they're actively talking about it. And I think the best merchandise will be part of the story that you're telling. And in that way, it is stronger, it's more tied to the memory because it's part of the story, right? So wherever there's room where you, if you have a strong storyline, where there's room to have a piece of that that ties into the story, I think is the strongest. So, so that's, I think what we see some really good examples are when you tie it directly to the story, and also when you are taking that merchandise area and you're making it also look like it's part of the story. So you actually make the entire thing immersive. And I mean, there are some good examples. Like a lot of haunted houses nowadays are taking their merch area and they are theming it so that it looks like it's part of the attraction, or they're kind of incorporating it in some way into that from a thematic standpoint. But I still think you're seeing haunts struggle with really making innovative merchandise. I think most of them do the basics, and a lot of them also, a lot of haunted houses also sell stuff that they buy and resell. More specialty items. I think, but you still struggle to see really good merchandise just because haunts, are smaller in scale, so they don't have like the resources like a theme park does. But there is a good example that I actually just did an interview about this that I haven't edited yet, but it's coming. The haunt that I was working at in Detroit, they every year what they do is they make custom bottle openers and wine stoppers, but they are made by the head makeup artist there at the haunt who works for the haunt year round. So what happens is he will pick three characters from the storyline of the haunt, and then he will hand sculpt a sculpture that's like a face, of that character. He'll hand sculpt it, and then he'll cast it. So he'll make a cast there, make a mold, and make a cast there at the haunt, and then he'll cast it, and he'll make resin copies of that, and then like attach the bottle opener or the wine stopper portion to it, and then go through and paint each one by hand. And
Wow.
they're all for the icon characters. So in that case, that's a pretty good one because it's the icon character that is there featured at the attraction, but it's also a useful item, but it's also, hand sculpted by the person who works there. So I mean, I think I think that's what you really look for in terms of, upsells or things that good. But you know, I, the photos are still also a good thing if they're a good photo opportunity. And I think in that one at the haunt that I also met, that the photo op that is at that attraction is also built in like seamlessly into the story. And that's true at a lot of haunted houses as well, but I think when you do it that way, the photos also can be a good one, even though they're not, as innovative as a custom sculpture. But it still is nice because people get to take a photo, with their friends in the environment. It's like a photo that they can't take on their own. And I think stuff like that is usually the key. Like if it's something that you're giving them that they can't do anywhere else and they can't do on their own. And I think that's a good differentiator as long as it ties into the story. And in this case, the photo also ties into the story, and then it's something they can't replicate. And so I think a lot of people also enjoy the photos and choose to purchase the photo upgrade because it looks so good. So I also think at Disney, that's also one of their big, Disney is great for merchandise, for Halloween merchandise. They have a lot of stuff that ties in. So is Universal. And Universal's food this year is much better than it was in previous years. And they're testing out like a tasting pass in Hollywood. But on the photo side of it, I think that Disney's also done a really good job of making it where, you get Halloween versions of the characters that you can take pictures with, and they have the photographers and they have stuff set up. And I think that really also encourages that, there's those souvenirs. And I think that they've made it into a whole souvenir opportunity. So yeah, overall, I think there are some bright spots out there. I think the independent haunted attractions are still trying to figure out really unique ways to do it. But there are some bright spots. There's the haunt that those custom sculptures, but there's also, I've seen merch items at several haunts that are unique. Like Some haunts will make dolls of their main characters, that are made there, little dolls, and then you have these sculptures. So like there's bright spots, but I think they're pretty few and far between. I think most haunts will focus on the photos and the basic branded merch, but I think that there's a big opportunity for them. I just think it's hard because when you're only open for a few weeks and you're an independent attraction without a lot of resources or purchasing power, it can be difficult to source those items. So the people that are doing it well are doing it because they're making it in-house, basically.
Fascinating stuff indeed. To the next question we've got here. What's one clever innovation any small or mid-sized haunt could copy?
Uh, that's difficult. I mean, I think that there's so much. I think when you when you step back and look at it as a whole, I think the biggest I don't want to call it mistake, but the biggest opportunity I think for any haunt or attraction or whatever is to think about it just like we're looking at the theme parks, right? So in the theme park world, the longest time people were trying to encourage more attendees. So you're just trying to get the gate count higher, right? Get the attendance up. And then we saw Disney, for the first time really start to discourage attendance because they had so many attendants that they started to discourage more guests and instead they focused on like per cap, right? So they were the first ones to really say we have to really start to increase the per guest spend. So they started to try and decrease supply and demand, right? They had too much demand, so they started to try and decrease the demand by making the cost more expensive or by putting, all these velvet ropes up for people. So that's always the game you play, right? With entertainment, with attractions. So I think that on its core, I think most smaller attractions don't think about that concept. Like they don't think about, you know, what's your capacity, what's your throughput like, and where are you giving, levels. So do you have like not just fast passes, but instant access and VIP? You have these items set up, but then also on a larger scale, right? Is there demand that you could like parcel out using some sort of system? So whether you use dynamic pricing or you use time ticketing or like whatever you do, are you trying to like parcel out your demand to make sure that your curves are more, even? And are you allowing for those multiple options? I think that's usually the first step. And I would also encourage attractions to think beyond that and think like 3-year, 5-year plan. What are they trying to become? I think that the most successful events now are successful because they're a lot of value for people. Because especially right now in America, the bulk of the consumers really don't want to go to a thing that is less than an hour for the price point. So that's when it becomes a hard sell. When you're charging $20 to $40 for a linear experience that you just show up and you walk through and you're done, I think that's a harder sell. And there are some customers that want to do that and get it done with, but I think there are more people that are looking for something that is perceived to be a higher value, at least in the perception. And so I think that's the other part I think where smaller attractions kind of forget. And I understand there's always parking infrastructure, all that stuff is always difficult. But like basically, where is it that you can add the option for the guest to linger more at your attraction? That is, I think, what a lot of haunts forget about. Like they're always focused on like the technology, right? They're always focused on like, oh, what can I add a new scare out of this, that? And I'm like, that's basically irrelevant. What matters is like where can you get them to stay longer and spend more? That's what matters. So like even if you take your haunt and you split it up into smaller sections, I think that's been the trend for a while, is to take a larger experience and split it up into a smaller experience and then offer a midway in the middle where guests can wait in between, where they, exit a thing, come back to a center area and have time there and then go back out or whatever. So however you want to do it, at the haunt that in Detroit, we actually have bars that are hidden inside the attraction. And so it probably doubles the time that people spend there if they choose to do the bars because they can wait in between each section at the bars and they get their drink and they hang out and they talk and they do that. So that actually increases, even though they're spending more money, it increases the perceived value because they are spending more time there. And there's a haunt in Indianapolis I interviewed this year, and their haunts are very small. They're almost like theme park size, which the theme park haunts are the smallest haunts that are anywhere out there. You know, anything that's like 3,000 square feet is tiny in the haunt world. Like most haunts, I would say, are like, I mean, so most theme park haunts are 3,000 square feet, which is about a 5 minute runtime. Most real haunted houses, in America are like maybe 30,000. So you're talking like 20 plus minutes of runtime. And so, and then you have some that have three or four of those. So you're talking a very long time. But anyway, there's one in Indianapolis that did a good job of like kind of consciously making them smaller at his haunt, but then really putting money into the midway experience. So, and then he also changed his ticket policy. So the ticket policy allows them to come back. So if they buy a ticket, it includes access to the five attractions. But if they don't have time to do all of them, as long as they've used at least one, they can come back any other night that the experience is open. And so that again encourages them to spend longer because they're not worried about missing something. So they can spend longer in the midway, which is better because then they have the opportunity to spend more. And guests actually want that. Like they like it's like who wants to drive several hours or drive far out to a thing and then you just do it. It's like 20 minutes and then you're done and then you leave. Like I think we're getting away from that as a trend overall, and it's more about providing more as much of an evening as you can. And I always think about it like if someone goes to a movie, they're spending like at least an hour and a half. So it's an hour and a half plus maybe the meal before or after. So you're getting to that, 3 or 4 hour time, maybe, or like at least 2 or 2.5. And so I think it's hard if a haunt can't match that or a smaller attraction can't match that. I think that's a problem. So that's where I'm like, you just think about it in terms of these blocks, And I like it best when you give them the option. So like there's always the option to do it faster. So if someone is in a time sensitive position, having the option to purchase the instant access or the VIP, and then they can just do the attractions and skip the midway and get everything done and leave. I think that's a good option. I think you need to have that option, but I think you'll find that most people want to make an evening and that justifies the amount of money that they're spending versus if it's only going to be a 20-minute experience, then it's harder. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I think
absolutely.
it's all those things together. It's like those main two things. Like first of all, thinking about your guest flow and thinking about if you're making sure you're spreading out the demand and that you're really encouraging that to make sure that your demand is spread out and you've got a little bit more stabilized. Think about your throughput, your time through your traction, all that kind of stuff. But then on the flip side, also think long term about, our job is not to scare people, it's to entertain them. And you need to think about the entertainment value that you're providing at your attraction. So I would say in the short term, your throughput, making sure that your demand is spread out. In the long term, making sure that you are creating enough entertainment to keep people engaged for a longer period of time.
Can you describe the haunt community and the examples of the collaborations and healthy competition between haunts and operators?
I don't know how to answer that question. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. The haunt community is it's very different because it is yeah, I don't know. It's yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that because haunted attractions are a terrible business that nobody should ever do unless they can't do anything else. Most haunted attractions are not run like businesses, and then so say if you have like 5,000 in our country, maybe 7% of them or less makes enough money to be like profitable, and then I would say maybe 1% has a year-round team. So when you say like haunt community, it's very different than like the theme park community or whatever, because theme parks run year round and they employ people year round. Haunted houses, maybe only 1% of them have year round teams, but it's a weird situation because most of the haunts, like the vast majority, like I said, about 97 or about less, definitely less than 10%, right, are in that profitable margin where they are like paying everybody and like doing everything, that whole like profitable, and still seeking profit and all that. But even then, it's tough, right? So I think frequently you will find in the haunt community where everybody has other jobs, and it's rare even that the owners don't. So even in a commercial attraction where they're charging and they're paying everybody, a lot of times the owners have other jobs. So it's just a very different thing because it's almost in I guess the better way to put it is that most people in the haunt community, technically speaking, they do the haunt as a hobby, even if they don't think of it that way, but it is technically that because so few, are working full time at a haunted house. So I think that makes it just different, because even with the actors, if you just think about it, even at large haunted houses, if you think about it, like the actors are only getting paid minimum wage in most cases. There are some exceptions, but in most cases they're getting paid minimum wage. And they if the haunt, even the largest haunts are open. I'm trying to think. The largest haunts are probably open maybe like 30 to 40 nights, and those are the largest attractions in our country. Most, like there are some, like that one that I visited this year, it's only open for 6 days. So like if you're only open for 6 days and you're only paying your actor minimum wage, then the actor can't live off of that job, right? So they have other
Right.
jobs. So then they're basically taking off work. So like they're taking days off of work to come and work at the attraction, right? So it's very different, than you would if you were working at a theme park. Like you're not taking days off of work to go work at a different thing. It's just a different thing. And so even if it's a large run, like a 40 night run or something, it's still not like enough really to replace employment for people. So so I think that's the other thing is you get a lot of people that are working on their days off, or they're do whatever. And then even during the trade show season, Transworld or even IAPA, I think that people in the haunted house spaces, they're taking vacation time to go out there to go to these events. They're not taking, it's not part of their like employment, right? They're paying to go to take it off. So I think that is the hardest part about the industry for people to understand or to grasp, is that like it is a lot of work for nothing. Like in many cases, you're paying to work. Even the owners or whatever, it's like these people are paying to work. Like the very few percentage of them are profitable enough to sustain year-round teams, and even then, the profit margin is not great. So it's just not a good business no matter how you slice it. So that's the hardest part, is that most of these people are, it gets a lot of work, but it's kind of like a hobby, but they get paid a little bit, but not enough to really make up for it. So it's really weird situation. So you
Right. Right.
so I think overall what that does is it creates a lot of passion. That's the good part of it. It also creates a lot of drama because when people are investing that much in their attractions, right? If you're volunteering, especially volunteering, like Field of Screams in Pennsylvania is a very well-known attraction that's very large, that sees a lot of a lot of customers. It's a huge operation, and it's all volunteer, right? And a lot of the stuff, even like at Niles Screen Park, has been going for over 50 years, I believe. They're still using volunteers, so it's just a weird thing because it does create a lot of passion because you have volunteers that are spending their free time instead of relaxing, they're working for people, when they're not getting paid. But then it also creates a lot of, I guess the best word is drama, just because when you invest that much into a thing, you have a lot of emotional investment in it.
Hmm.
And that is good
Yeah.
and bad because then, on the flip side, like just people can get very emotional about it because it is artwork in a way, and so you're investing a lot into the art of what you're doing, and then art is subjective, right? And so it's hard. That's why it's so hard to say like what is a good haunted house or what is not, because ultimately art is, haunted houses are theater that you walk through, and theater is art, and art is subjective. And so that creates problems, right? Because even in the certain area, you'll get people who say this is better than that's better or whatever, and the answer is none of them are better because it's all subjective and it's dependent on what the customer wants or what the customer enjoys at that moment. But because the people are so invested in it, because they're like volunteering or they're suffering or whatever to work there, when you hear criticism like that, it upsets them more, I think. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you can also see that at Disney. You could also see that at Disney, right? The cast members always get upset if, when there are Disney policies or, you know, this or that. So I don't know. I mean, I think you do see that devotion other places too, like with Disney, I think is a good example of
Right.
where the cast members are very invested,
Hmm.
and
Sure.
yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know how to because it's such a yeah, it's a weird environment.
You touch on this next question. For anyone watching who wants to get into this industry, where should they turn up? Events, or you mentioned trade shows like
Yeah,
IAPA.
definitely don't. I'm gonna keep emphasizing, like, do not do it. Like, I'm not really joking. It's not a good business model. And so I think the best way to do it is if you really find it fun and you can find a way to do it where it's not like hurting you. So like I think the best way is where again, you're not sacrificing anything. So like where you have a job and you have regular days off or whatever that you have as part of your job, and you get paid well, and then you can go work at the haunt, as on your weekends or, after you're done with your job or whatever, and it can be a fun thing that you do for the Halloween season. I think that is fine. That's fine, but you're not sacrificing anything. You're not sacrificing like your future. You're not sacrificing that stuff. Um, Trying to be successful as a professional haunted house person as your main source of income is extraordinarily difficult, and it is
Right.
not something that like is easy at all, and it's like it's very few people, just because you have to really like you have to like want nothing else in life basically, and it's very difficult. So I would say I think the first piece of advice I would give to the person is really think about it. Like, think if there's anything else you can do, and if you could just have fun with it, or if there's a way to do it without, like hurting your, not, without sacrificing your future or things like that. But otherwise, I always tell people that they should start at a haunt. Like, I think what happens is most people want to open their own haunt, which I've been there, so I understand that mindset. And there are a lot of professional haunters that will tell people to start there, and I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I 100% disagree with that. I think that if you want to do your own haunt, you should start with a home haunt. Again, back to when I just like start with a home haunt where you like decorate your yard or do something that's not, again, not going to harm you in a significant way. So like,
Right.
you know, you don't want to get stuck in the lease or try and have to get a loan out or try and get investors or financing without knowing what you're doing. So I would like start with the home haunt and just start that kind of stuff and learn the skills. But honestly, I always tell people go work at a successful haunted attraction to learn how they do everything. And you can always ask, the one thing I will say is everyone always is happy to teach people, also because the haunt skills are so specialized that if they teach you, it helps them because then you can do stuff at the haunt and you can do other jobs. So it is always, they do always teach you. And even places like Fear Factory in Salt Lake City, they have a whole makeup training program where they train people year round and they graduate people there. So like my recommendation, if you want to try and make it work as a professional, like you think you want to do this professionally, is to go work at a successful attraction first because you need to understand the logistics, the business. You need to understand how it all fits together, like how your labor costs impact your length of opening, how the guest length of stay impacts your throughput. You need to understand all of these components. You need to understand you need to understand how everything, like how the amount of time that your makeup designs, how that impacts your labor costs. You need to, and you need to understand your costuming, how that all fits together, your maintenance, how much damage is done to stuff and how much maintenance you need throughout the season. Like you need just to understand every department before you do try and get investors or open your own thing or whatever. And that's not like I think too many times people get focused on the building components. They get focused on like how do we, how do you sculpt this or how do you make that or how do you do makeup or whatever. And in my opinion, those are not the important skills. The important skills is understanding the business side of it and how it all works together. If you want to be a business, like if you want to run a business, you need to understand the business side of it. And I think you can always hire a makeup artist. Like that's the thing. But you need to understand how all the business segments fit together. And I think the easiest way to do that is to work at an attraction and to really understand what it's like. So I always recommend people do that. They go work at attraction, they understand everything and they try and move from department to department to learn how everything is done. And they can move between attractions because every attraction does it differently and you learn a lot by moving between places, but that's what I always recommend. I don't recommend that you like I don't recommend you just start your own thing out of nowhere, without any background. I think I understand that's what everyone wants to do because they have their vision, they have their idea, but you need to understand the economics of it in order to understand if your idea is viable. And like, yeah, so basically here's a test. If you're sitting there and you're like, well, no, I know everything and I can do my own thing. Try making a business plan and taking it to a bank and see what they tell you.
Mm.
And like, if you get it and it works, like, then great, have at it. But I think that those type of things are a good test. Like, do you know enough to be able to get a loan or an investment, or can you prove enough information about the business to be able to get that? That would be a good test as to whether or not you're ready.
There we go. There we go. Some useful tips there, indeed. Okay, it's Terror Trivia time, where we'll put our guests on the spot. Let's speak with some trivia questions, some quick fire questions. So let's fire away. What's the
I don't know
best scare
anything.
attraction you've ever seen?
Oh my God, I have no idea. Also, I can't answer that because I would make people angry. I think the way I like to answer this question is normally by just breaking it up, right? So I said art is subjective. So everything, first of all, everything is subjective, right? So best is difficult to say because it's all a subjective piece. Um, I would say you also need to think about this in terms of like theme parks are very different from independent attractions. I think that Universal has the biggest Halloween events in the world. So some might call that the best. I tend to enjoy the aesthetic and the environment that Universal creates. But that's just me because that's kind of more the aesthetic that I like. I like nostalgic Halloween and I like feeling safe at attractions. And so because of that, I think I do like the Universal stuff a lot. Independent attractions, I think I do like when there's story that's coherent and I like when things all fit together. So I think stuff like Hell's Gate, Hell's Gate is an incredible attraction, and anyone that has that kind of class, like Netherworld is incredible, Hell's Gate are incredible. Those attractions are just phenomenal because the creators of them are master storytellers. Even, Dark Hour in Texas is a smaller attraction, but it's all fits. The attraction all fits together. You understand what's going on. I just went to 13th Hour in Indianapolis as well, and that one, again, the story is coherent. The actors are real actors. They are interacting with you. There's storyline. I think those are the ones I like the most, but a lot of people will disagree with that because they like to just be startled or they like to have stuff that's like more extreme. But that's what I enjoy.
There we go. Oh, if you could ban one haunt cliche forever, what would it be?
When they say get out, yeah. Yeah, because I think that's like the default for a lot of actors is terrible. Like get out or boo or fresh meat, any of those phrases, like it's just sloppy. Yeah.
Most underrated soundtrack or sound effect?
I don't know. That's hard too because it depends on the story. Yeah, but I think there are a lot of attractions that do have custom soundtracks that are made for them. I'm thinking now about like the shirt I'm wearing, which is for an attraction in Canada, actually, Dark at for Edmonton, and they're in Edmonton, Canada, and they have custom soundtracks for that was composed for each attraction. And I think stuff like that is underrated because the guest doesn't always you don't always realize that. But I think when they do it in that way, when they make the custom soundtrack, and especially when they take the time to like, put up the noise blocking fabric and they do directional speakers, I think sound can be incredible when it's done right. But again, it's resources and then but places like that.
Okay, and the final question from this trivia round: if you could design a haunt inside any real world location, where would it be?
I don't know. I feel like there's probably a haunted house inside of every, you know, classically haunted place or, facility in that way. I mean, basically anywhere where you can think of, there's been a haunt that's been tried there. I think that's part of it. I think there are a lot of untapped markets that don't have people that have tried those markets, but yeah. So I don't know about that one. I definitely would stay away from anything where that's already been developed. So I'd stay away from Los Angeles, I'd stay away from most places in California that are any big cities. You'd stay away from Chicago, you'd stay away from like Philadelphia, stay away from any of the big cities and go for something that's more developing is what I would say, like an up and coming type of city where it has at least a haunted house, but not too many.
Fascinating stuff, Philip. Thank you very much for your time and greatly appreciated on those questions and answers. And yeah, we wish you a very, very happy Halloween.
Yeah, thank you. Happy Halloween.
Well, that's episode 4 lined up and in the can of In the Loop with InterPark Magazine. It is my thanks to Philip, and be sure to keep up to date with the latest news and interviews at interpark.co.uk, where as always, we will keep you in the loop. A very happy Halloween.